I'm very happy to be here, and I'm glad to see that there are people from all over Europe and beyond that have joined us. I'm going to go just straight in to show you the Circular Regions platform and tell you a little bit about how it all came to be. We launched Circular Regions in about a month and a half ago. And it originally came from Circular Oslo, and we're now working in other parts of the Nordics, but we've had interest from groups internationally looking at how can we collaborate to scale the impact that everybody has. Circular Regions, our core focus is about bridging the top-down and the bottom-up circular economy. This is one of the key pieces. We're seeing that policymakers need to understand what the people are doing, the feet on the ground, regardless of what you're working on, which stakeholder group you work with. And so we focus primarily on place-based innovation, connecting the urban and the rural communities. This is something that we need to be able to see as the spaces between cities. I often say that cities can't feed themselves. We need to look at the broader rural community around that and what are the functional regions. We look at a variety of regions. In Oslo, we're a capital city region. In Umeå, it's actually a cross-border region because they have a natural connection with Vasa in Finland. If you look at Reykjavik, for example, you're seeing a region that's an island. And there are natural sort of delineations, and we can learn a lot about how regions function. We're also multi-stakeholder. This is a key piece of the puzzle. I think anybody, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, no one stakeholder group can do it on their own. We need to be able to bring everyone together with a shared understanding of how we can accelerate the transition. And our goal is mission-oriented. How can we empower individuals and organizations with the tools they need and the resources that are available? And everything we do is data-driven. You'll understand by the end of this that I'm a bit of a geek. I'm the systems architect behind the platform, and I've spent the last 2 to 3 years working with a variety of stakeholders to be able to understand the data that they need, the resources they need, and how can we make everybody have a shared intelligence. As I mentioned, we started off in Oslo as a proof of concept. We've seen that Oslo, a lot of people see as a sort of a front-running area, but it's a very fragmented circular economy. Depending on which stakeholder you're talking to, which industry, different sectors, they're all investing significant resources, but they're not working together. And this happens to be the case in many cities and regions. There's a lot of talking about collaboration, but the actual getting together is very difficult. So one of the things that I do recommend everyone take a look at afterwards is that one of the things that we first released 2 years ago, you can find here under how, is the partnership methodology. How can we provide tools, and that's an open free resource for you to go in and say, how can I work with any other stakeholder, someone who may even see me as a competitor, and say, this is a way that we can work together because this is what we need to establish. We work with the concept of systems entrepreneurs. Some of you may have heard the term before. It comes from the Skoll Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation. And you can read more about it in here, but basically a systems entrepreneur, and many hubs are actually developed by systems entrepreneurs. These are the people who are circular economy experts, such as many of yourselves, and they work with the public sector at the city or regional level, and sort of help with them often with framework agreements, creating projects within the circular economy. They also work with industry. They look at the startup scene. They're the ones saying, this is how you can become circular. And they understand where everyone is in the bigger picture across the stakeholders and the sectors. But they also know all of the NGOs, the grassroots organizations, the ones that are really walking the walk where their feet touch the ground. And so what we want to do is be able to provide them with tools and resources to be able to do more with their ecosystem and activate the entire group. And one of the pieces of the puzzle is when you're talking to multiple stakeholders, you often find that people will have a facet of the circular economy that they're seeing, whether it's procurement, whether it's urban planning, whether it's business development. We need to be able to provide everybody, no matter who the stakeholder is, no matter what sector they're working in, with a holistic understanding of the circular economy. And recently, the European Environment Agency released a report on a framework for enabling circular business models in Europe. And that framework is something that we actually identified about 2 years ago in one of their textile reports. And it breaks down these 5 life cycle phases: materials, design, production and distribution, the consumption and stock, which is the use phase, and the waste end of life phase. And so within this, we're also saying we have to have the smaller loops. I think we all know here that if we're talking about recycling as our first bet, we've already lost the game. We need to look at the smallest loops for the biggest impact. And this is about sustainable development. And in order for that to happen, we're talking about the entire economy here. We're looking at the micro sector with sort of users and consumers, the products and the services that we access, the companies we support in doing so, the companies that we work for and how we can initiate them to move circular. But it also works at the meso level with clusters, networks, and eco-industrial parks working together to find collaborations to really scale together. And it works at the macro level with cities, regions, and nations developing policy. And what we need to do is provide the data from the bottom up to the top-down solutions to develop better policy. And one of the pieces of the puzzle that we bring in with the Nordic model is we're not only talking about environmental quality, we're also talking about economic prosperity, but social equity. This is a significant piece of the puzzle that most people are not thinking about when they talk about the circular economy. And this has been a core piece for ourselves. And you'll see when we look at what we talk about with case studies, how that information is going to be so relevant going forward when we're looking at putting people and the planet first in a well-being economy. We've connected all of the data that we're gathering to the Sustainable Development Goals. Most people are looking at 12 and 17, responsible production and consumption, and partnerships for the goals. But we have data directly connecting initiatives that support good health and well-being, for example. And everything that we talk about is business models, because the circular economy is an economic system based on business models. And this is about the private sector, the public sector, the third sector, with individuals at the middle. How can we look at all of the business models and enable them all to work together towards a circular solution? And we also identify information about technology readiness levels. Are these sort of in their nascent stages? These are ideas that are coming to light that need to be grown, but we're also implementing the concept of societal readiness levels. And this is something that came from the Danish Innovation Fund, where you look at societal readiness level of 1. This is an idea, a problem. Somebody has identified a problem and said, I have an idea on how we can solve this. I'm sure you've all been there. And once you have that first level, you then have to identify who are the stakeholders. That's level 2, when you start identifying who they are. And you work your way up as you start developing pilots with them, identifying how you can work together until you get to the level of societal readiness level 9. And what's really interesting about that is these are the products and services that we access that are just integrated into our day-to-day lives. And we need to be able to understand how we can go from the idea stage to integration where we don't even think about circularity, it's just part of our lives. And so what we're doing is we're working with lighthouse municipalities. And I can explain how we've done that. And we're developing decision support tools. The OECD has a program called Circular Economy in Cities and Regions. And the city of Umeå in Sweden, here in the Nordics, was one of the original pilot cities of 3. And the OECD, which is about better policies for better lives, identified 18 different action points for any city or region. And the number 1 recommendation that any city or region should do is to map out what's already happening, because then you can identify the synergies, the gaps, how you can establish solutions, economic incentives and policy to accelerate what's already going on. And this is where we came in. We were actually collaborating with systems entrepreneurs with their feet on the ground in Umeå with the digital infrastructure to actually map out the circular economy. And I'll show you how that actually works. I'll take an example of in Oslo, where we did the original cases. When we look at case studies, right now, you can go to pretty much any Circular Hub's website and identify case studies, but these case studies, the data is not interoperable. We often talk about what a case is, but there's no standard. And this is something that we are eager to work with other hubs to say, how can we develop better standards? We look at a region, we have a regional timeline, what is going on, how did they get there with their strategy? But the actual case studies themselves allow us to say what's going on with all the different facets of the circular economy. Is it agriculture, community, education, electronics, social enterprise, sharing? How can we identify the initiatives that are out there? We're also able to map these because all of this data that we're gathering is dynamic, which means that we can go into any place and take these case studies and say, how can we look at public and private procurement? How can we enable public companies, public entities, to be able to say, I want to find local and regional solutions, because they have the mandate, the strategy is there, but they don't know how to identify those solutions. We're also in a position to be able to identify business to consumer or government to consumer solutions that allow us to say, how can we integrate this into our day-to-day lives and find solutions that are circular? And an example of a case study, I always go to this one here as my local case study.
Cynthia, can I jump in here, as it's actually already time for questions?
Yeah.
Sorry for interrupting. I know it's
That's
super interesting. We had one question in the chat I would like to pose, and sorry for the harsh interruption. We just want to stick to a schedule.
I told you to cut me off if I went too long.
I could listen to you for ages, but yeah, we want to come to everyone. Marina Simon asked, could you please repeat the name or the topic of the publication by the European Environment Agency?
That was it was the EEA's framework for circular business models. I can put that into the chat afterwards when someone else is talking. I'll make sure you get a copy there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then a question that actually interests us as Circular Berlin especially is, how do you convince municipalities to engage and work for the circular economy? What was your strategy, or what is your strategy? I've got the impression you might have already gotten into that with what you were just saying earlier.
I'll just turn off my screen share here. One of the things that we've seen is that if you want to work with a city, they have to have somebody in there who's mandated across all of the different sectors to work on this. We have seen that often, public entities, they have limited resources. So, and the budgets are put into departments. So you may have business development working on something, or waste management, or urban planning. What you need to do is be able to get somebody in the city to say, I need a mandate that is cross-cutting. So we can take all of these different budgets, work together. And what was really interesting in Umeå, which is a really fascinating place to follow, they actually set aside the funding within the city to hire somebody full-time across all the departments and coordinate circular economy, which means that she is not held to waste management. And one of the things that we are seeing with public entities is, if they can only work within certain sectors, the other stakeholders in a community, in a city or region, they may not be seen. And what we need to do is enable solutions that allow the unusual suspects to come up. So we're not just stuck in the sectors that are getting the funding. This has been a driving force for me, is how can everybody be seen? It's not just the usual suspects.